sit down here. Good evening. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. My name is Mike Urban. I'm the city administrator. Welcome to our second of 3 town hall meetings. Tonight with us are council members Nathan Weller from Ward 2, council member Eileen Macoll, council member at large. Councilmember Becky Dubin had to be out of town tonight for work-related reasons, so she's attended another event. It's your opportunity to come and talk to your elected officials. So one of the things we learned from last night that I just kind of want to reemphasize on the document up front on the ground rules is keep the comments brief to make sure that everybody has their chance to speak. Tonight, it was a pretty big group last night. People funneled in as the evening went, so we just want to make sure everybody gets heard. So before I kick it off to you folks, to the council members for a few comments.
Great, thanks for coming. It was a very interesting meeting last night and gave us sort of a guidepost, or gave me a guidepost anyway, for where we might want to expand some things and talk about them a little more in depth tonight, and then you can take them home and talk to your friends and your neighbors, and then I get a chance to sort of throw in my pet topics as well. One of the things that we emphasized last night and was we are doing an empty and vacant buildings ordinance. It is in the works. It's something that I've been working on since before I was on council, back when I was a member of the Landlord Tenant Association. It's dear to my heart, and it's dear to the topic of our downtown, is to get things looking spiffy. I mean, if you're going to throw a big party, what's the first thing you do? You clean up the house. So that's what we need to do with that empty buildings ordinance. I've got some examples here that we've been talking about, and I got lots of copies. So if you want to take a look at that, hang on until we're done this evening, or you can come up and get them right now. The other thing is dear to my heart is seasonal irrigation management, which means monitoring and putting some sideboards around how much we're watering lawns, basically, in the summer. 52% of Pullman's water use is during the summer months, and we know exactly where that's going. And some of us feel pretty strongly that we need to kind of massage the culture into a different direction, that green lawns are something that we love, but it's going to be a love that will be lost at some point. And don't forget that the Water Summit is October 18th at SEL. It's always a great evening. We've got a dynamite speaker. There's giveaways, there's prizes. There's usually lots of food if you get there early. And that starts at 4:30, and that's October 18th at SEL. And there'll be a lot of great information about what PBAC, Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee, where we're at in terms of our research and development of process, and a lot of information about the aquifer. One of my challenges is sort of letting people know what is happening with the aquifer and what is not happening, because we hear some kind of odd things every now and again, and we'd like to make sure there's some clear information. One of the things that we also talked about was climate resilience last night, and I wanted to let everybody know that we are very much aware that heat islands exist in our community and in every community, and there are ways to combat that. I've been watching the heat maps since they were first produced by NOAA. It's been just a little over a year ago, and we know how valuable our green spaces are. And I will ask some clarification from our city manager. Anytime we go to buy a vehicle, we look for an electric option, do we not? I think we were buying dump trucks or something here a while back, and we looked at electric option.
Yes, there's a set of guidelines now through the state that we do have to go down a checklist of options towards those directions. I think there's some waivers in certain areas because I believe the fire department, it's still a developing item. You'll see a few out there that everybody's touting, but from what I understand, maybe with a head nod or not, a lot of those are getting returned because they're not quite ready for prime time yet. Yeah. So not on every vehicle yet, but every vehicle where that option exists, there's a checklist that we have to go through before we go to a gas or a diesel option.
And our resilience excuse me, committee, I think you're on the resilience committee, aren't you? Yeah, I mean, this goes all the way down to like lawnmowers and trimmers and chainsaws and all the way down. We're looking at electric options. And speaking of that, we're also looking, Mike, hang on a second here. We're building into the budget a professional parks person, are we not?
Yes.
Okay. So a lot of the things that have been going on with the parks that some of us have not been very happy about and have been pretty vocal about and raised a few eyebrows about, we're going to have a professional parks person. Mike and I are acquainted with a fellow in Bellingham, James Luce, who is if you can get him out of the tree, is the best guy. We're going to maybe try to get him over here and help us out with some stuff. Downtown master plan, please ask a million questions tonight. I'm going to try and wind up my personal remarks here. Please ask about the bypass if you're interested in that. Please ask about traffic flow because we've got some interesting things happening there, and we've got RJ here to help us out with some of those planning things. We got Mike here, Chief Heston, to talk about emergency messaging. If there's a lot of questions about that, I'd love to hear them, and you can get a chance to talk to Chief Heston about that. And the 311 system. Mike, where are we at?
We are in process of converting over to the new Munis software, and that is the backbone that the 311 system will be placed upon. And it's like with every software conversion of this size, it's going to be a process, but it's happening as we speak.
Excellent. Okay. And Nathan and I are here to answer individual questions, no matter how large or small or curious or benign or whatever it might be. So please, this is your meeting. I'm going to stop now.
Sure,
Nathan.
but before I abandon, or I'm sorry, Nathan, go ahead.
Please go.
Well, okay. Before I abandon, a new piece of information as of today that is useful for this conversation is Welch Comer will be back in front of City Council on October 18th with some more information. So that's the downtown piece.
The 18th? Isn't that the Water Summit?
The Water Summit was put on the schedule after we had already set the date. It's the only meeting in October. It's the budget rollout as well. And then the other piece I forgot to mention is I got a note from our IT department. So if you're up here speaking, please get up right next to the microphone so we can get you on the live stream and the recording that's going to happen. Thanks.
Okay, well, I think I can say that it's good to see all of you here. Eileen, with being the at-large, she represents the entire city. I represent the slice of Ward 2. It's a unique situation. Many students, apartment housing, and I don't think I can or am going to say much more because I'd like to hear what questions, comments. I think the important thing to keep in mind is we are always available. And though we do represent separate sections of the city, I believe we all feel responsible for the city as a whole. So if anything comes to you or anyone watching afterwards, please get a hold of all of us. I feel personally that the city of Pullman for a while has been in some challenging situations, and we are making some great headway, not only with our staff that we have, the new technology that we've adopted. Personally proud of the GIS that we've adopted. And in all, I think the concerns, I always like to see the concerns from people. I'm not afraid of any challenges. In fact, I welcome them. That's the way we grow. So please, even if you're afraid to say something, please say it. And if it's something public that you don't want to say in public, you can always come to us afterwards. I will say, and both Eileen had made comments, both of us had, that we wish we were able to be down there in with you, kind of in a family setting. Unfortunately, due to some technical difficulties. We can't be down there. We have to be in front of the mic for recording and so on. So in any case, I'm keeping it a little brief. So thank you so much for being here.
And you better be careful because I might call on you. I know a lot of your names. Bob?
Sorry, I was just getting my notes. I'll come up. Close. Hi, I'm Bob Cady. I live in Ward 2 and own a couple three businesses in Ward 2, and I'm a member of the College Hill Association. And a couple things that I wanted to ask about going through the goals for this year. There's the goal for adding a parks professional, and there's also the goal for removing dead and compromised trees citywide. And one of our goals for the next 5 years is to find a way to establish a tree bank so that there is a fund for replacing trees. Removing trees is easy. Replacing trees and maintaining trees is a lot tougher. Up on College Hill and up in apartment land, you see a lot of the trees, a lot of the canopy in College Hill core is reaching end of life. A lot of those maple trees were not the trees that should have been planted, but they were planted 75, 80 years ago. They're getting sick. There isn't a regular option for replacement. There isn't an arborist that is a professional arborist that the city has that we can go to. And I like the idea of raising the canopy for grass, but I also like the idea of regular maintenance so that streetlights work the way they're supposed to. And it doesn't mean cutting down trees, but it could mean every 2 years you trim instead of every 10 years you trim. And that could keep the trees healthy as well. So I'm curious as to like what kind of progress is going towards that. And then tied to the general, trees, neighborhoods with a lot of mature trees tend to be neighborhoods people like to live in. That's why it's a concern. Those neighborhoods also like to have parks, and Ward 2 has a park and a natural area. It has a piece of property that the university owns that is currently not utilizing, that it calls a park. But I think we all know that that's not actually a park. It's real estate that's underutilized in the eyes of the real estate portfolio. There's opportunities around the water towers for natural trails and parks. There's some of the greatest views in town are on the water towers up there in apartment land. There's opportunities to improve the quality of the tree canopy and the walkability of that neighborhood. There's a lot of space, but it's not public space, and it's not always the easiest to get to. So those are the main things that I'm curious about how that process is going.
Yeah. My allergies, speaking of trees, my allergies are killing me. It is vital, and Nathan knows more about dark skies, cool cities than I do. That's kind of an area of his. Mm-hmm. But we absolutely do understand that the tree canopy is essential for general health for people and the environment to live in. When those NOAA maps first came out, it was shocking. And they have the demographics broken down just to find degree that tree canopy is directly related to income. And so if you want to look at disparity in a neighborhood, if there's a place where there's no tree canopy, that's where the most need is in terms of income disparity, and you can break it down in all sorts of different ways. But the basic is the fewer trees you have, the lower income. And that's an easy metric to start to address. And I think that even in a wealthy community like Pullman, I think that's important to look at, especially with apartment land. We can definitely be more demanding of developers to either retain trees that are there. I know there is some of that in the code, but to add more canopy, not necessarily more grass, although we can improve the grass that's there, as I have suggested. But there's lots of different ways to create wildlife habitat and seating areas, recreation areas, and yeah, that's on the list, and we are looking, hopefully hire a absolute fire-breathing parks professional who will be able to scope out an entire plan for us, because at the present time, we just really don't have the capacity, sad but true.
Yep.
So tell us about the dark skies and cool cities.
Oh, well, I appreciate that, Eileen. And Bob, One of the cool things, and I think something that I'd like to see utilized later on, is using GIS to be able to track those trees and to be able to find out exactly where all of these are, age, so on and so forth, as to the best of our ability. Oh, thank you. As far as what Eileen was discussing, you're right, some of the most amazing views are totally taken up by lights and so on and so forth. But I'm more interested in what, so with the tree banking, is that something that we can do at the city? Is that something that you're doing?
So the idea would be to provide a vehicle so that if the tree in my planting strip is dying and has to be removed, that it isn't years until that tree is replaced. And the property owner, if they had trees 20 years ago and they died, can just go to the city and say, I would like to replace the tree in the tree bank in my planting strip where a tree was removed, and that there would be a fund that the city would maintain where they could say, yes, these are the 5 trees that are suited for this, that will not disrupt pipes, will not disrupt the sidewalk, that match everything else. Which one would you like? Where would you like it? We'll come and plant it. And that could be funded by developers that take out trees. That could be funded by if a tree goes out, a tree goes in. There's a lot of different ways. Something as small as like 0.1% of $1 million development could fund 25 trees. But if there's no vehicle to put that money anywhere, you can't even fundraise for it. Like if there was a vehicle and we had an arborist and we had a schedule and we knew how things were going to work and what was available and what worked in what part of the city, then I would donate $1,000 to it. Easy. Done. And you could probably find a lot more people that would be happy to fund it so that their neighborhood doesn't slowly just become treeless. Just within view of my business, of my core business, since I've owned it, I mean, it's been 18 years, it's been a long time now, but in 18 years, there's 20 fewer trees within view of my business. And that's just 2 blocks in any direction in the middle of College Hill.
Well, you talking about this is getting me pretty excited because of the environmental committee that we've been talking about. This may be something that, now, I was on the committee to help form this, and I could see it being a subset of that committee to undergo discussions, and this is...
Something as simple as, would you like to plant a tree in Pullman? I mean, I think we're still a Tree City, USA.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
We should probably act like it.
yeah.
We can't just remove trees, and we can't just treat problem trees. It has to be, there has to be a vehicle for replacing trees, for planting trees, for people that want to plant trees. And I think in this community, there's more than enough people that would be happy to fund it if they didn't have to sit with $100 in their hand and wait for a chance to fund it. If they could just say, you know what, I'd like to make a donation. I'm building these buildings. I understand we're taking out 12 mature trees, and I understand that these 5 trees that we're replacing with, won't ever be as tall as the trees we're taking out, and we'll never recoup that. And it's a $1.2 million project. I could probably afford $500, $600 to go into this so that somebody else could plant trees. One of the things you see in apartment land is they all follow code, but those trees are 40, 50 years old, and they look like saplings.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. It still looks like a brand new development. It doesn't look like a mature neighborhood. The oldest apartments out in apartment land have been there for a very long time, and they don't look like a community because the trees that were planted have not grown to actual maturity. They've grown to the size that they were designed by the architects to fit, and that's it. And that's a problem because as developments go out, as we get into suburbs in Pullman, you're going to notice, and if you drive out through the suburbs, you will notice that even when those trees are mature, it's 20% of the canopy of the old neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And that's
That
a
is
problem.
interesting.
Yeah.
That's a real problem. So that's one of our goals for College Hill Association. College Hill core is very densely treed and has been for a very long time, and it's part of the charm of the neighborhood. And those trees are aging. They do need attention, and some of them do need replacement. And we've got vehicles for every other aspect at the city except replacement. So you
I like
can't
that.
just keep cutting and cutting and cutting. You have to replace.
That sounds like a great starter project
I
for
like
that
that.
committee. Yeah.
That's
And I
awesome.
wouldn't get too crazy with committees. I would just go and say, what's it cost to set up an account so
Yeah.
somebody could donate money, and
Yeah.
then hire your arborist and say, what are the trees we should buy with it?
That's
Yep,
exciting.
Yep, that's great. And like saying, Bob, your point is really well taken. What a lot of people don't realize, that trees have a lifespan too. You know,
Yeah.
I've got a silver maple that has to come out. I have a pine tree that has to come out. And the arborist that we contacted, he's a year out. You know, we can't get him for a year. So the demand is definitely there. Nearly every birch tree in the city is sick with
Yep.
whatever it is the birch disease is at the present time. And so there's not like there isn't a lot of work to be done. Yeah.
Almost every maple on Colorado Street is going to be dead in the next decade.
Which makes them dangerous too.
Well, it makes it dangerous, but also, like, if you look at the most iconic pictures of Pullman,
Yeah.
they all have trees in them.
Yep.
Like, it's all focuses on the trees, it's on the fall. And if all those trees die and there isn't a plan for replacement, an appropriate plan for replacement, for a direct replacement, not just a tree.
Yeah.
It has to be an actual direct replacement. Cutting down 12 trees to build a house and then planting 2 saplings that'll never have a trunk more than 5 inches is not the same. So we're getting to that point. There's already been a lot of trees lost again, and almost all of them are in the planting strips. They're all in the realm where it's the city mutual accountability aspect of it, and there just isn't a vehicle currently for replacement. So, and again, it would be great if you could skip the committee aspect and say, you know, if you need $1 to open an account, I'll give you $1. And just give a place where people can donate, and then once the money's there, you can figure out who wants a tree in their yard, and you might be surprised how many people want trees.
Well, I can definitely tell we're going to be having a discussion with Mike regarding this, so I'm sure he's taking notes. And just so you know, I'm listening, I'm looking down because I'm taking notes
Oh,
as
no, that's
well.
fine.
Yeah,
It's all
no, this
being-
is exciting.
It's all being recorded, that's why I'm leaning in.
Yeah, yeah. But I
So
really
that- and
appreciate
then
it.
opportunities for cheap parks, water towers, you have to have access. Make sure there's benches.
Yeah.
You know, you're
And-
out there doing the work, it's very affordable, it's very easy.
And it's interesting you bring that up, because one idea that I had discussed with, I think it was Mark Workman way back, was a pocket park across from Beasley in that little area, that little triangle area, and being able to look at those small things as opportunities for benches. Be able to sit there, and yeah, I completely agree. There are opportunities.
And I think up in Ward 2, you lose track because the university's there, because there's so many open spaces, but those aren't parks.
Yeah,
They're not actually public access, and the more the public accesses them outside of football weekends and things like that, the more you learn that they aren't actually there for public access.
That was one of the discussions that we had at Goals, was to inventory all those little spaces. Again, GIS comes into that, and just plain staff time, which we don't have, to inventory all those little spaces and figure out what is university, what is parks, what is streets, because some of the stuff is streets and sidewalks. It's not park at all, even though it's a little green space. So that's definitely on the list of projects to be tackled.
And the
figure out what all those little spaces represent and how they can be used.
The university does have a highly detailed inventory of structures and trees covering College Hill core, and I believe it goes up towards apartment land as well. They have that from 2006, 7.
yeah, I remember that was involving. Interesting. We were
It's-
just talking about the U district and
Yeah.
how they were
Some good
inventorying.
did come from all of that
Yeah.
nonsense. But it's there and it's available. So it's a great starting place, and it's all geolocated and everything's, they know exactly where all those trees are, at least were then. I know if you go back and look at it now, you're missing a few dozen.
Yeah.
So just those are the things that for College Hill Association that we're really interested in, expanding access to public lands and public access for parks, and not getting distracted by university spaces that aren't actually parks, that look like parks when you drive by them. And then just the ability to build a tree bank and start something so that we can work on replacement and replenishment and maintaining healthy trees instead of addressing sick trees.
Yeah, exciting.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Love
Bob.
it.
Thanks for your
Love
time.
that idea.
And I like this format. It's a lot easier than trying to get on the schedule with council. 'Cause
Well, keep bringing your ideas.
whenever
Yeah,
it's actually
absolutely.
public comment time for council, it's never enough.
Yeah.
So, great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob. All right, don't everybody rush up here. John Mark? All right.
First of all, thank you very much for doing this. This is a fantastic format. As was it Bob? Yes. Is it Bob? Yes. As Bob said, this is a this is a great format, and it's really nice to actually have some FaceTime with the. Even though you are not representing the ward I live in, it's nice to be able to. Well, actually, Eileen is. So there we go. Anyway. It's come up several times. First of all, I wanted to bring up something completely different. Mary's Park. Thank you for being a spearhead on that, Nathan particularly. I know the original idea was to be a food forest almost. What it morphed into is fantastic. It is just as vital to the community as a food forest could be. And I know there's a push to start that. That may tie into what Bob was talking about as far as trees and creating a public space with trees and more shade. And that could be an interesting thought. So just another thing to add to your notes there, Bob. One thing that keeps coming up, and I'm both happy and bummed about it, is GIS. You've been talking about how great GIS has been for Pullman, which is absolutely true. I would say it's not just necessary, but a vital tool for most, if not all, municipalities to have at their disposal. And the reason I'm happy is because Pullman is forward-thinking enough to actually implement something like that. I'm bummed because other entities are not there to help you map out those outside areas just outside of the city limits. I would personally like to change that, but that's neither here nor there. What I would like, though, is since you brought it up, I've run into a lot of people that are not familiar with GIS and how important it is to running the city, running municipalities in general. If you could give a brief explanation of why it's so important, I would really appreciate that. Speaking as, I mean, it's no secret I'm running for county commissioner, but that is something that has been bothering me for a long time. Whitman County does not have GIS, and I would love to see it finally implemented, even though it's 14 years past the date the Secretary of State said, you have to get this done. Or I'm sorry, it's 4 years past the date. They had 10 years. If you could just briefly explain why it's so important to have, so people understand why it is vital to various municipalities.
Well, thank you so much, John Mark. And I know, especially with your campaign schedule, it means a lot you being here and sharing your information, and your lovely wife as well. And, you know,
I had to drag her here.
as far as GIS goes, I am not, so I can't give you all technical, you know, aspects of it.
Sure.
But the layering of information that's provided on the GIS system, particularly ours, will provide information on water mains, on streets, on there's just so many different ways that it can be used. It's not just a map. A lot of people think that it's similar to a Google map or something, but it's not that. The amount of informational levels that provide data for not only staff, but for also citizens. And if you are a data nerd, you can go diving through these. You can find out historic layers, and I know Pullman is doing this as well. Historic layers on down the years. You can go through, you know, plots of land, like I said, water, all of this information is out there, and it is, as you said, essential. I do share your frustration with outlying areas. We've been very fortunate with WSU that they implemented it before we did, far before we did. But being able to collaborate with places like Colfax, Whitman County, Palouse, all of these areas, for the future, as you said, it's vital. It is vital, and will help police, fire, water departments all do their jobs much better. And for us data junkies, it's really exciting to be able to see all of the information out there, and creates creates an ability for us to really see what's going on, instead of just having to go to a department to see what is my information. You can see it right there. It's right there in front of you, and that's what representation is all about, bringing the data to the public so it's there for them, not having to jump through hoops in order to find out what is my plot of land. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I get a little bit emotional about it because I do feel that it is so important for us to be able to continue fighting for that.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
Keep it up, and someday, right?
Yeah.
If nothing else,
Absolutely.
in my position, I've been here a long time. Things that I fought for a decade ago only now start to be realized. Things that were radical ideas, GIS.
I wouldn't call that radical. We're
It's
the only
not
county
radical.
that doesn't have it.
It shouldn't be radical. But in 2013, when I was discussing it and saying this is what we need, it wasn't adopted until fairly recently. Social media, it's funny, this is just a tangent, but social media, Facebook. When I was on city council in 2008, I said, this is what we need to do. It was a decade later that it happened. So keep fighting the good fight, and just remember it takes time. But thank you so much.
Understood. I do have a real quick question. Mike, we were talking one time in a meeting with the Historical Society at the Depot Heritage Center, and you mentioned, I mentioned that Whitman County was the only county in the state that didn't have GIS. As far as I know, that is entirely true. I think we're making a joke saying we were the only county west of the Mississippi. He's shaking his head no. Okay.
I wasn't making a joke.
Okay.
I'm reporting the news.
Fair enough. Fair
And
enough.
it's old news at this point.
Yeah, yeah. Eileen, do you have anything to add that Nathan didn't
No,
cover?
I think we're good on that. The
All right.
GIS, what a day late and a dollar short sometimes. That a lot of not even connected with COVID, but we lost a lot of people just due to retirement, just due to the natural turnover in city staff. So a lot of that institutional knowledge went with them, and our GIS is still kind of playing catch-up. If you had a problem with a water situation on a Sunday afternoon or whatever, and there's a foot of snow on the ground, you better hope that Randy shows up, because he knew where every valve was, and he could find it in a minute. But when Randy retired, all that went with him. But now with these better technology, we can sort of fill in those data gaps and do what needs to be done in a timely manner. So we miss those guys, but now we can play catch up on some of these GIS things. Yes.
Well, thank you both for your responses, and thank you for your insight. I appreciate it very much, and thank you for everything you do for Pullman.
Thank you. Okay, people, come on, somebody else come up here. I'm only halfway through my list. I'll go back to my list if we have to. I'm goading people.
I'm Rick Grunwald. 1715 Northwest Lamont Street. Thanks for being here tonight and for serving our city. I'm just going to, you brought up a couple things that I'm interested in, so I'm just going to ask. And that is the two bypass, explain the bypasses. I appreciate that. And then also, what was the other thing? Well, I guess that's the main thing. But also on our electric vehicles, like buses, have we budgeted in or taken into account when batteries packs fail? I imagine those are pretty expensive.
Yeah.
So that's a question I had. And then I'd love to hear about the bypasses. Is there also a south bypass and a north bypass kind of thing? Or
Well, we've kind of evolved beyond that. RJ, do you want to, because somebody mentioned the north bypass last night, and I'm not sure that the context was clear. Can you clarify for our listeners and our audience? And then, of course, I've got, you know,
Yeah, I'll do the best I can. Generally speaking, that's in the box of duties with Public Works. But the North Bypass is a right-of-way that currently exists and is owned by the Washington State Department of Transportation. It varies in width. In some places is up to 300 feet wide. For a general location, it runs, if you take Grand North, it is north of Terraview. It runs in an east-west fashion and would terminate near the airport. The South Bypass largely does not have a right-of-way existing, and that's a major hurdle both in obtaining the right-of-way and the cost associated with it. There's been some alternative routes discussed with Whitman County a little bit further south. Additionally, there could be some development, how should I say, south in Whitman County, like I said. So the right-of-way to the north, in my opinion, is more valuable because it connects WSU and the airport, and those two facilities, those two locations, we've put a lot of resources in recently. So I don't know if that answers your question, but hopefully it does.
yeah, I hope that clarifies. And again, this one's been kind of near and dear to my heart. What we've been calling the South Bypass for some time, and you can actually go see it, and it's all of 1,100 feet from one dead end to another dead end, and then it drops off of a cliff. What the county has been encouraging, and what WSDOT has encouraged also, is what they're calling a freight study. And what I'm looking towards that freight study is out on, I get it wrong every time, Kirkendall Road. The North Bypass, as we've been talking about it for years, and the South Bypass is what we've been talking about for years. We're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars. The state has made it sparkling clear that they are not interested in contributing to that effort. So we would have to fund that all ourselves. Should we be able to push forward on this, the Kirkendall Road, and if you want the map, I have a map. If you leave Pullman, if you go south like you're going to Lewiston, on the left-hand side of the road, you'll see this kind of oversized garden shed that's bright turquoise. That's right at Kirkendall Road. You've passed it a million times. Kirkendall Road, Pat Wright and I drove it here the other day. Well, it's been a month because the weather was really weird. But anyway, we about flooded out. It is relatively flat. It is a little bit of curve, and it would only impact maybe 2 residents along the way, a few more residents when it reaches Moscow. It joins the Moscow Highway 95 down there about where the old Chinese restaurant is out there. So it is an outstanding, you can't believe it. Go out there and drive it. It is just, if you pass the turquoise shed, you've gone too far. It is not well marked. It is currently used as an agricultural road. It's used a lot by the people who live out there and know it. It would be the cat's meow for a bypass. I'm very hot on the idea, and we're hoping to kind of keep the ball rolling on that as the state wants to conclude some of these freight studies. It's almost kind of an esoteric, aspirational kind of a thing. But I'm really supportive of that, as is the county. And the county's been helping to inform city staff. And keep the ball rolling on that. It's doable. It's really doable, and it would be cheap and easy, and it would take some of these things off of our plate, because one of our goals for the downtown development is getting that heavy truck traffic off of there and controlling the noise. Noise is a huge factor for the downtown situation, and boy, we get those trucks off of there, that's it. It's done, and all that, all the exhaust and all that stuff, but go out there and drive Kirkendall. It's a beautiful drive at any time of year, except when it was flooding, when Pat and I were out there, but minor problem. But yeah, it would be absolutely the thing, and it is, at least on paper, it is somewhat in the works. The one that you may have seen also that raised people's hair up a little bit was one that we call the Anaconda that ran right through downtown Pullman. Again, it was sort of an aspirational thing. The state wanted 2 examples of possibilities. That one kind of got thrown in the hopper, and it was never under consideration. There was a lot of consternation about it on the storybook for the downtown, and no, it's not under consideration. We're not gonna do that. So, but go drive the other one. And get hot on it and start writing letters and talking to your legislators.
If I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the biggest aspects of the bypasses is the thought, as Eileen mentioned, of taking the heavy traffic off of downtown. That's the main goal. It is unfortunate with, a major highway running through our downtown that there's a lot of hoops that we have to jump through. And it's been a long time us working with WashDOT, and at this time, it is just not feasible in their minds. But things change, and they seem to change pretty quickly. Right now, with increased costs of everything, it's not something that they would fund. I think we've shown as a city, as a community, that we are well invested in taking that traffic off and improving the downtown. And we've put money into pieces of that bypass. At this point, it's kind of out of our hands. So that's unfortunate. But the technical information that Eileen shared is very accurate. And I've seen the maps, and I appreciate those, I know. As to your other question regarding the batteries on the buses, Mike, do you have information if that's covered under contract with our, no? Okay.
No, those are considered wear items. So as we look at the age of the buses and how many hours or miles are put on each, because sometimes, idling hours, a lot like fire engines, they don't travel much, but they idle a lot, especially when they're putting out a fire. We just need to look at, we're probably going to need to replace a battery here, here, and here, and that's something we put in our repair and maintenance budget.
Okay. Does that answer your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Joe Astorino. I'm 310 Northwest Joe Street. I just want to thank you for your dedication and service to the city. So my question is about a gap that social workers often find in coordinating care, which would be legal services for low-income folks. And one thing I've noticed in Pullman recently was the Northwest Justice Project, which opened up a physical location. I'm not sure if they're open yet or not, but on Grand Avenue. And just my former life as a social worker / sociologist, I found that a lot of clients needed that help navigating, finding legal services. I know that there used to be a legal services program in Pullman where they could assist you with, I think it was pro bono lawyer time to help navigate either, whether it's housing situations or other kinds of things that people might not have funds to find a lawyer from. So I'm just wondering, are there things that the city is thinking about in terms of helping coordinate with Northwest Justice Project or other kinds of legal services? Is that on the radar as a need that could be developing as we move into this housing situation?
So I'm not sure that we've looked into it. It's a great topic, and I'll be a little vulnerable here, and I'll tell you, I've actually had to rely on them back in early, mid-2000s. I had a situation with a apartment housing. And they provided pro bono assistance for myself. So I know the value of it. I don't know that we have any way, any plans about that. I think I took some notes on it. We can discuss it, and maybe the best avenue is Community Action Center. Do you know if Community Action Center works with them at all?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think that's where the legal services, they used to have a legal services program maybe 8 years ago. But
Okay.
It's definitely been a gap.
Yeah, I think that would be something I'll look into. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, I'll jump in here. Again, with the downtown, this has been near and dear to my heart. I've been in on this from the get-go. There's always a concern that there hasn't been enough input from the community. I can assure you that starting with BDS and Welsh-Comer, there's been a tremendous amount of community input. There have been a lot of gatherings, informal, formal gatherings. Brian David Scott, that's BDS. Met with the disabled community, met with I think the landlord-tenant group as well, met individually with a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders. So there's been a tremendous amount of community input. And one question that came up last night was, is the downtown plan, or we're talking about CCL, are we going to swallow that whole? Will that be the document? Will that be the plan? That is the work of the consultant. The final decisions will be made by city staff, city council, and our community. They've got a lot of things out there for us to look at, and we disagreed with some of it. We vehemently disagreed with some of it. The most famous, of course, is the back-end angle parking. And the other one was, I have to always look at it because I always get the terminology wrong here. The time-restricted parking. Grand Avenue has been identified, and we all agree that Grand Avenue is the problem. We talk about Main Street a lot in terms of business development, and storefronts, but in terms of traffic, Main Street is not really the problem. It's Grand, and it's Main into Grand that is really the bad challenge there. And one of the things that the consultant suggested was time-restricted parking. And you've seen these in other communities where there's no parking from like 7 to 10 in the morning, and then again there's no parking from like 4 and 5 in the afternoon. So you gain an extra travel lane. It kept coming back, and we kept saying no, and it kept coming back, and we kept saying no. So we finally had to really say no. We felt, the steering committee felt that with as many visitors as we have that come to our community, not just for the 16 big weekends, but a lot for business and for pleasure and for conferences, that's just too confusing for our visitors. We want people to be able to park downtown, be comfortable downtown, and not be able to go back to their vehicle and realize that they've got either their parking ticket or their vehicle has been impounded. The other part of that was we don't have the means to enforce that or impound those vehicles. If we have a visitor weekend, whether it's football or whatever, if we've got 4 or 5 cars that we've got to tow, we don't have the capacity to do that within the city. In other communities where they do have this and they do make it work, they are contracted with tow truck companies, And the little lovely Rita, she gets out there, right in the meter, she writes that person a ticket, and she calls impound right away. That car gets removed, boom, right now. We simply don't have that. What we do want is to create a much more welcoming environment downtown, and we have had to say no, no, no to that's one of the biggies. There will be other little things too that come along that the steering committee, staff, council, the community will disagree with that are in the plan, and we'll make adjustments accordingly. We are not swallowing this plan whole. We like the vast majority of it, and there will continue to be input along the way as we develop our downtown revitalization.
I think somebody,
But,
we have another person I just.
yeah, I'm sorry, I can't remember his name.
Is there anyone else that would like to come up? Has questions? Bueller? Sorry.
I love it, thank you.
These aren't as positive things. I think they're opportunities. One is my own fault, so I'll own that right off. The parking tickets downtown escalate as they go, and I'm definitely the person that planted the seed in police chief's ear about that about 6 years ago. But there's no way to de-escalate them. So if you live downtown in one of the 15 or 20 apartments downtown, and you have parked over the 2-hour period at some point 3 times, and you're at a $100 ticket now, there's no way to go back from a $100 ticket. And if you live downtown for multiple years, that's kind of tough. So just something to plant a seed. I do think tickets should escalate. Like if you're a habitual offender over parking, absolutely. It shouldn't be, I mean, back in the day it was $10. So I would just be like, yeah, park illegally, do what you want. It's $10, just leave it on the windshield and call it a day. And that's why I pushed for the escalation, because we had issues with the previous meter parking enforcement, telling business owners to move their cars, business owners complaining about not having enough parking while they were parking in front of their own business, a lot of things like that. But I do think there should be maybe a time period after a certain time, those come off your record and you can go back down to a normal parking ticket. Or if a ticket isn't paid in a certain amount of time, then it stays or whatever. Just an option to de-escalate the incremental increase for people that do live downtown. Because there are 20-some apartments that are right on Main Street and Grand. Other than Evolve. There's a lot of hidden apartments. Obviously, Evolve's there. They have their own parking stuff. But that was one thing. And then the other, I know the city spent a lot of time working on vacant building plans. And honestly, and I know this is a hot button, but I have to say it. The city spent 20 years feuding with Swanners and trying to find a lever to pull to get them to do what we want, to get them to do what the city wants, to remove what everyone calls an eyesore. If the city had spent 20 years building a relationship with Larry, you get a lot more with a lot less anguish. The amount of energy, if you think back, and I know the building doesn't look good, and I know everyone likes to harp on it, and I know people like to work back channels and try to figure something out, and I know I'm 90% sure a large part of this vacant building plan that's coming up has been triggered by the Mimosa building over the years. But I really think at some point the city needs to look at itself, the city council needs to look at itself and say, are we here to punish property owners exercising their legal rights as property owners? Or are we here to build the economic development of the city and build positive relationships with property owners in the city and residents of the city with the goal of bypassing those situations in the future? Because that was a small problem started by somebody speaking off the cuff back in 2002 or something like that. And it has just grown and grown and grown and grown and grown and grown and grown because for the first decade, nobody was willing to say, hey, what can we do to help solve this problem? What can we do? Who can we put you in connection with? What's the hurdle? Where do we need to find some wiggle room? It's always been this person refuses to talk to that person. we're going to make them do it. We're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars and hours and hours and hours of city time to try and figure out a way to make that happen. And while everyone's focusing on Mimosa, downtown has regularly experienced 20% vacancy in commercial spaces. There are buildings that look nicer than Mimosa on the outside that are maintained in a poorer fashion on a day-to-day basis that impact walking, they impact traffic, they impact trash, they impact everything. But this fixation on Mimosa and this feud between the council and the city and Larry Swanner, got to stop. Like, it's just a waste of resources. And I would just like to see the city move in a positive direction. And I wrote this as one of the goals, and I'm sure half of the people on the council that read it knew exactly who had said it. But 20 years is a long time. I mean, for the downtown development, if all the business owners that were concerned about how downtown was going had started a fund and they'd each put $50 in it every month for 20 years, you wouldn't have to wait for $1 million grant. You know, so I would just like to see more positive approaches, more relationship building, because all it takes is one person reaching out and saying, hey, what can we do to help? Where did this all start? Like right now, there's probably only 2 people that remember what started that feud. There's probably only 2 people that were actively at the city that remember what started that feud. And I know that it was discussed last night. It's discussed constantly. And a large part of Pullman's self-conscious image is tied to that building and that feud. And I would really like to see the city, the council, everybody get over it and move to a positive direction. I live literally in the building right next to it. I help Larry shovel a sidewalk. He's out there shoveling the sidewalk in the snow himself most times. It's not that he doesn't care about the building. It's that there is a deep-seated feud, and he's a stubborn guy. But he has the right to be. It's his property. Everything's within legal bounds. So if we could find a way to move to more of a positive, and I think with the downtown revitalization going, it's a perfect opportunity to go that route, because there are a lot of building owners downtown that need to have some kind of a relationship with the city to get movement, because you can't force them. You know, you can build vehicles to try and force them, but it's just, that's so much more expensive and it's so much more effort than reaching out and saying like, hey, can we blow the leaves off your entryway once a year? You know, so I would just like to bring that up because, again, I think there's a lot of good things going on in Pullman. And as a business owner and as someone who literally lives right next to it, I tell people that I live behind the second creepiest door in town. And if you're wondering what I mean, just go like 10 feet farther, you'll see. Like, you'll see which one I don't live behind. It's a fixation that's got to stop. Like, there's so many things in Pullman. I would just love to see a more positive approach of reaching out to business owners and property owners where there's a problem, with an approach of not, what do we have to do to get you to fix this? What can we do to help you fix this? And most times it's just a communication issue. And I know for Mimosa, it is a deep-seated grudge with a few people that has lasted forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And it shouldn't be something that is the focus of the city council. It should be something that's the focus of the city. And I know there's a lot of other things going on, but I also know that anytime there's public comment on design standards, on downtown, on music, on this building, on that building, it always circles back around.
You know, you're absolutely right, Bob, and that's been a frustration of mine, and because it is exactly as you've explained. One of my favorite books right now is by Doug Griffiths, called 13 Ways to Kill Your Community, and he devotes an entire chapter to these kind of feuds. Mm-hmm. And at some point, everybody just sort of has to take a deep breath and move in some direction or another. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember the genesis of it. I've heard various versions of the genesis of it, but at some point, and I've done as much walking downtown as anybody and taking pictures, and the vacant buildings ordinance, and I want to explain a little bit more about the vacant buildings ordinance, and I have copies here of some examples for you to look at. We're very careful. We're going to be very careful how we word this. We're going to be very careful how we structure this. We are going to start out with a carrot and then move to the stick as needed. We have to be very careful. I catch people and I try to gently correct them. We're talking about a vacant buildings ordinance. We're not talking about an abandoned building. The word abandoned gets you legally over into a different territory entirely. We're avoiding the word blight because that also has a completely different connotation to it. So we're making sure that we all understand each other as we go forward with this in the full knowledge that there's been a lot of damage done and there's plenty of blame to go around, as there often is in a situation like this. So we're gonna see if we can, find a place to start over and address other. There are certain council members that want to implement a vacant building ordinance for the entire community. I'm focusing on the downtown. I personally want to keep it focused on the downtown so we don't lose our way, so to speak, and help us stay focused and do it right. And many things should have happened over the years, and we can all sit here and name a list of things that we would like to see different, or buildings either in the community or either just on the edge of the community or right in the center of our downtown. So it's a place to start. And we'll start as we're going to be very careful in how we word things and how we approach these situations, because it is situations, plural. And you're right, there has been too much emphasis on one party and one building when there's a lot of other things going on as well. So we're trying to take a holistic approach and not take a victory lap. Nobody's looking to take a victory lap here.
Yeah, I think you absolutely need to have appropriate legal means to address vacant buildings. But I do also think that the city has landed at that option as the final move of a 20-year grudge. And it may be spread out beyond, but it's very clear that has been like the original impetus. So I would just like to ask that there be some effort for relationship building. Actual relationship building, sometimes it means that people have to apologize and come back. From what I've heard, the whole thing started from an offhanded eminent domain threat from one random city employee at one point after the main downtown flood, when they were putting in the water. The flood control.
I'm gonna jump in here. There's been a lot of discussion about conditions of property, and again, I'm gonna make myself a little bit vulnerable here. I like that phrase. Thank you, Nathan. That a survey was done on College Hill several years ago. They surveyed 419 properties, and people were given good marks and black marks. They were not consulted. It was just done. I have a copy of this. It is literally this thick.
Yep.
My property was identified as having no trees on it. I have 19 mature trees that we take very good care of. So if there's misinformation that coming from whatever source, we have to be very careful how we proceed, because that's the way hard
again,
feelings do emerge from. And I
Yes.
resent the fact that my property got slammed for having no trees when I have beautiful trees on my property, and we've had the arborist in there, and we've, there's a lot of ways that things can go wrong, and I know this is one of them with this particular building, and we try every day to make it fair, to make it equitable, and to move us forward.
Yeah, and I would just like to say that, like, your example is the perfect example of something starting without consulting the property owner and ending up in a place where it's something that hurts when it happens. But overall, again, my goal would be that it's good to have levers, but it's better to have relationships.
So if I may jump in here. On your first point, I'll get to the second. I think it's a great idea as far as the parking tickets on how to reduce that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how long, 3 months, a year, would you say, to
Oh,
reduce?
I would make it, as somebody who is currently at the $100 level.
Yeah.
I would make it longer than 3 months. I would,
Okay.
like, you need a little bit of encouragement to not abuse the system.
I thought we had a 2-year sundown on that.
I don't know. I don't think there is. I don't think there's, but I'll check it tomorrow and see.
Oh, we can
But
check
anyway,
too, yeah.
Anyway, and again, I caused that problem. Like I did that for myself because I was very flippant about people complaining about downtown parking and knowing the number of business owners that actually parked in front of their businesses while complaining about a lack of downtown parking and were getting tipped on when to move their cars and whatnot. And then even if you did get a ticket forever, it was, I mean, even going back to when there was coin like meters down there in the 90s, the tickets hadn't adjusted since I think 1992. So if you got a ticket, it was between $10 and $20, and $10 to park all day downtown is a hell of a deal. You know,
Well,
so
I-
you just pay the ticket and go. So that is very much a problem that I've caused for myself, but I think it is something it's worth looking at and refining it over time because, you know, nothing's perfect the first time out.
Yeah, you brought a lot of good ideas, and that's something we can follow up on. Chief is back there. As somebody who got in under that, I lived above daily grind. So I got in right under that time. So,
Yep.
or else I'm sure I would be at the 100, you know, and that was early 2000s.
Yeah.
As far as the mimosa situation, I really, as I said, I came on in 2008. I have no clue what happened there. I heard hear my parents talk about, oh yeah, it was a great place to eat, you know,
don't
this
know
whole
about that.
thing, you know. I don't know the relationship. My brother took classes from, you know, Dr. Swanner, and you know, so nice person from what he said. Did well in class, so I'm sure nice person. Of course, I think any way to open up relationships, I think it's become such a hot topic that it's difficult for those of us who don't really know what the situation is or was to, you know, open that door, especially if we don't know the person personally. I would appreciate, I mean, I'll just say this, if you know them, I wouldn't mind meeting them. I
Yeah.
wouldn't mind, you know, hearing their side. It's unfortunate. I don't think that people, whoever it involved at the time, will apologize. It's human nature to feel righteous about their decisions.
And part of the reason I brought it up is because it's been so long that it's literally reached urban legend status.
Yeah.
And it subconsciously drives so many decisions and so many discussions, and nobody has really engaged in when it's happened. And for something that is as monumental in the overall conscience of the city of Pullman, to not have Larry's number is a sign of what the status of that feud has reached over time. And that's the reason I brought it. It's been a long time. Downtown revitalization's a thing. He's been working on plans for the building. It's the perfect opportunity to move into building relationships. And I will contact him tonight and see if he's okay with me giving you his number. And if he is, I will give it to you so you can reach out to him. But with the city's GIS, there should be contact information on there as well.
Yeah, well,
So
I think,
just I thought this was the right place to bring it up because I know that it comes up and I know that it's been a very long time and all the right wheels are moving. All the right people are in the right places to really put this away in a positive manner, one way or the other. And I would just like to see some energy towards a positive outcome that avoids having to pull levers. But I do think the vacant building ordinance absolutely is necessary. I mean, the building I live in is also not great. It's also not great. If it wasn't right next to Mimosa and people weren't fixated on Mimosa, I guarantee you would be fixating on the building I live in. So,
Well, Bob,
but-
I appreciate you doing that and bringing it up. I completely agree. One of my major philosophies is when you get into certain positions, whether it's on council or whatnot, ego sometimes drives. And I've found over the years, you need to set it aside to be able to create what you said, those relationships. See it from the other person's point of view. So if you're agreeable to that, I'm more than agreeable. And trying to think about where you might live, because I think I took a martial arts class in the place right next to Mimosa. It was a big metal door, and you went upstairs.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a commercial warehouse, double door, painted the same color as the wall.
Yes.
And it looks like nothing, and most people don't know it's there. And I
Yeah.
scare the hell out of people when I walk out of my door half the time because they don't know there's a door there because they walk by it all the time. But there's a whole apartment and an office space upstairs. Used to be a big studio.
Yeah.
It's the old JCPenney building right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, I went to a concert up there, and I took martial arts in the front area. I recall that.
Yeah. So yeah, again, I wanted to come up. I think that, Eileen, you touched earlier that there has been a lot of retirement. There's a whole slew of folks that came in the same 3 to 4 year span in the late 80s that have all retired over the last 3 to 4 years. And there's a lot of positive movement going downtown, and there's a lot of positive things going on in the city. This is one of them. And I think that a little extra positivity into it could really put a lot of problems to bed all at once and just kind of move on. I would love to never hear anything about Mimosa again. It's the first place I ever got food poisoning, and it wasn't great. But that was before it flooded out. Swanners didn't own it until after it flooded out in that big flood in 2001. There was a big one in 96, and there was one in 2001, I believe, downtown before the flood control went in. So again, if no one else wants to say anything, I know everybody in this room at some point has had a discussion about that building, and I would love to see it not be a topic of discussion anymore, without going through months of it being a major topic of discussion all over the front page of the newspaper.
Thank you, Bob.
cool.
That's a
Thank you.
breath of fresh air. Thank you.
Bob mentioned, if we've got anybody else, please come up. Bob opened the door for me. He said urban legend. That is one of the urban legends. There's others too. And that's always kind of a source of amusement and frustration for me. I'll go through my pet ones. We have a few minutes left here. Misunderstanding about the aquifer is one of the things that is very frustrating. I encourage everybody to go to the Water Summit. It looks like we've got a calendar complication there for me. But there's been a lot over the years. One of the urban legends is that Moscow has an aquifer and Pullman has an aquifer, and that Moscow's doing a better job and Pullman is not. And at this point in time, it's all the same aquifer. It's all the Grand Ronde. The upper Grand Ronde and the lower Grand Ronde are both being used by both Pullman and Moscow, and the low that Moscow used to use is no longer being used by the city of Moscow. They can utilize it if they need to, but right now it's being observed very carefully for natural recharge, which it is doing. Even in this dry season, it got a lot of help this spring, as we all know. So when you hear people say, well, Moscow's doing this and Pullman's doing that, in terms of the aquifer, it's all the same aquifer. You hear people say, this doesn't affect me, I have my own well. Well, it's all the same aquifer. So that's one that I'm always curious about, and also related to water. And I checked this out with engineering. It's a wonder engineering doesn't just lock the doors when they see me coming. I had a discussion with two people, actually, about the wooden water pipes, that there were still wooden water pipes being used on College Hill. That was actually live and in use. And I checked it out with Kara Haley. She was very patient with me. We dug out some old drawings. There are indications on some of the drawings. There's a little faint dotted line that says wooden water pipes. So once upon a time, there may have been wooden water pipes on College Hill. And again, this is an urban legend. My brother-in-law is a contractor in Seattle, and he swears up and down that the old-timers say that on Capitol Hill in Seattle, there are wooden water pipes. And I had to laugh at him and say, you're going to hear this story no matter where you go. There are no wooden water pipes in Pullman. I had one more here, and I can't, we do need to turn back to something that's a little more serious, and I know this is important to Nathan, to work up completely different shift gears here. A cooling shelter and a warming center. So I know we're sort of fire and ice here. Nathan's been working diligently for years on trying to figure out a way, go for it, on warming, go for it.
Oh, thanks, Eileen. Well, we had a warming shelter here that I worked very hard on with police. I know fire was involved, Community Action Center, Family Promise. And it was actually right in this building before everybody moved in. It was in the, right in the basement. And that warming shelter actually was really community driven. And I'll share this one story real quick. When I came in, it was it was Christmas night, and it was the shift that I was taking. It was 2018, and it was Mary Beth Rivetti and myself. And right behind me, this gentleman was coming through the door in flip-flops, and he had a big knapsack, army knapsack on. And I turned to him and I said, so are you here for volunteering? And he looked at me, he said, actually, no, isn't this the warming center? I said, yes, yeah, it is. And he said, I need a place that I can sleep for the night. I absolutely come in. And at the time, the volunteers that we were replacing were from the Islamic Center, and so he started talking to them. They all started talking. I took him over. He got some food and some water. We had people who had given stuffed animals for kids. And right away I said, you know, I don't know if you're interested, but we have this table of all the resources. And there were pamphlets from churches and Community Action Center, veterans housing. And he went right up to the veterans housing and he said, you know what, this is exactly what I need. And, you know, when he went back over and he signed in, didn't need to, but he did. There was a room full of about 16 cots. And he chose one and he asked, can I please charge my phone? I'd like to call the veteran housing right away. I said, well, of course you can. It's Christmas night. I don't think they're going to be available, but please. And he left a message, asked to use the facilities to wash off, and then came and told us about how he was in the Iraq War. He had suffered a brain injury, suffered from seizures, and he had 3 years under his belt at Caltech. He had a son in the area and was estranged from his wife. And that right there, I know a lot of people may say there's not a whole lot of homeless. We don't really need to worry about it. It's not having a whole lot of homeless or a whole lot of people in poverty. It's the individuals that those impact. And I couldn't think of a better way to spend my Christmas night than sitting there listening to this man who was just trying to get back into WSU, snoring his head off the entire night until we closed at about 4 o'clock. And then he asked for a ride down to the police station to spend the rest of the time down there while he waited for a ride. So that's not anything technical. I can't share anything more technical about it. It was a community effort for only about 3 or 4 months. I find it was a success. So a warming shelter in the future, I think, is imperative for our region. We are a growing city. We have a great lifestyle. People come because of the lifestyle. And that's going to attract people who may be homeless, who may be wanting to get a job at SEL, at WSU, at, Waters, which was Decagon, at any number of different places. And there's going to be poverty. It is better for us to be proactive than reactive. And I've been working on this, on poverty, on homelessness for, since 2009, when it was common for a lot of people in the city, staff, council members, people in power, to say, we have no homeless, we have no poverty. That doesn't mean it won't come. That just means you're not going to be prepared. So, sorry, I get a little emotional discussing that. It was transformative. So, the cooling shelter.
Thanks, Nathan. As we just, Lonnie, yes, please, come up.
Took a lot just for me to stand right here. And I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No,
There
no,
wasn't
go ahead. This is
much
your
of a
meeting.
silence to have a chance. My name's Lonnie. I live here in Pullman, but I've been in this community, 36 years. I was born and raised in Garfield, just north of here. But Pullman was kind of the big city when you're in a rural community. It's just massive. Compared to, some other cities, they call it a small town. So it's relative to someone's point of view, or what they've seen through their eyes. I've had some experiences recently with the city where I came for information, and it seemed like it involved infrastructure, and they acted like they had no maps on the infrastructure in this area. I should have a little backstory to this. I've been a handyman for 9 years. I just got out of that. I'm now working at the building supply, because over those 9 years, I built relationships there. But the houses I managed weren't in apartment land. I don't actually know what district I live in, but I live up just off Hall Street. And it seemed like when I came to the city to get information about why this house kept flooding, and this is a house from the 70s, not a newer house, one that had sat there 30 years before they built a subdivision above it. Now, I'm not saying the subdivision's the reason this house has flooded over and over and sold different owners. But could it have been? Maybe. Did they start producing these catch basin ponds in the next set? Yes. And I think it's relative. That's just my opinion. I can only speak for me. But what I can say is I'm just the common man. I'm just a common person. What I've seen is people are too scared to get sued to help someone. And I've had to put a shield on to not show my emotion. Because in that fact, you get talked about, or they just think whatever. I'm a very quiet individual. This is huge for me to just stand right here. And right before this meeting started, I saw there was some YouTube shit, and I almost didn't come in. I've never been able to talk in front of people, so I'm just trying to do it without thinking too much, because I'm an overthinker, and it can be good, it can be really bad. It goes both ways. I'm just glad I'm speaking now. You guys talk about a new program, technology that involves the city's infrastructure. I think that's great. That's a start. We're using technology in the right way. The social media, I'm just seeing people distance, and it's almost, it creates biases way faster. The social media, or the media that's controlled by certain individuals. I mean, for me, I'd like to see more real news, more real people, and more real good, trying to help your neighbor, not try and get him out of town. I don't give up. That's in my blood. I think it's in a lot of people's blood. Because if you look back generations, there was a lot less people here and a lot more work ethic without any technology of the electronic kind, I guess, you know. But I'm hoping for change in our lifetimes and in our children's lifetimes. And the only way that's going to happen is if we start now. And it doesn't just take me sitting right here. It takes fucking everybody. Everyone's going to have to pitch in and recognize around them the future, where our kids are going to be, all that. And I heard some good things tonight. I had to step out for a minute, and I wish I had enough because I wanted to hear more. I think we could be headed in the right direction, but it's going to take more individuals to speak up, more individuals to really care for the truth versus what they're told in hearsay. I was involved in one of those Ziply fiber incidents here in town. It's in that same house that kept flooding. It ended up being a fiber optic cable running right through a main footing drain, or ground drain, I should say. And what led me to believe the subdivision above was even a part of that was the fact that the only way I got the city's infrastructure is I did a public records request with the city. And even then, I had to ask the exact wording right in order to get that information on that property. And sure as shit, there's all the maps of the new infrastructure that was going in above it. And this is just my opinion. I think the city inspectors need to help out more in a good way than just show their knowledge of law. Maybe to help the common man succeed in the right way. This is really hard to be here right now. I just hope we're heading in the right direction. We need to look at the future past just our kids. And it's going to take all of us. And it's going to take caring. Alcoholism has ran in my family for generations. quit drinking in 2013, January 22nd. Up until last Friday night, I had one to try and fit in with my common man. It felt good to fit in, but what I noticed that night is I was able to be real, and I want to stay being real. I don't want to hurt feelings. I know I'm emotional, and I don't want my tone to go the wrong direction. I'm passionate right now, and I hope it stays. And I'm hoping to change the youth that are in this city. And for me, youth includes these college kids, because they're coming from everywhere. And if, you can put the right ideals into them, you're changing the world. And if they can do that to the next, it keeps going. But I just hope that when someone's just trying to do good, maybe you can do good and help them. And not to judge just by the way someone looks. And I know that media is involved, the social aspect, the news, the TV, in getting that into our heads that it matters that much. The way you look or how you talk. This is a very diverse community. I like it because I've met people from all over the world. And what I noticed is we're the same. And I think if Pullman and Moscow collaborated together more in these communities, that change can come faster. I've met a lot of people just since working at the building supply. And it's meant a lot. Because before that, I was afraid to speak. I worked in the 100-year-old houses without the proper education to know which shit's dangerous or not. I had to pick vendors' brains. And by that, I just mean ask questions. I asked a lot of questions, and it educated me. And that's most of the reason I went to the building supplies. I asked them questions, lots of them. And they helped me not give up. Even if it felt like I was failing, I was still getting better, even if it was just a little bit better. But, and over time, that builds. I'm probably going to leave it at that. I don't want to motor on. You guys talked about parking issues downtown. And if this city's going to keep growing, look at your forefathers. They were building up. Maybe a parking garage or two, if we can figure out the right spot, could alleviate a lot of that. And I know this might just be a dream, but maybe even 2 lanes in downtown. And that really, unless you do parking garages, that's not going to be a thing either. But other than that, I don't know. I see why they're building out, but that doesn't solve where Pullman was built, where it started. Just don't forget the earlier generations and why they came here. That's why I'm still here. That's all I got.
Thanks, Lonnie. That's wonderful.
Do you mind if I take? Lonnie, thank you so much. As somebody who is also, even though I'm up here, I think you've seen that, wear my heart on my sleeve. It takes a lot. It does. So thank you for being brave. Thank you for that. Welcome to the community. Thank you for being here. And keep having your voice out here, because that's what's important. That's what makes it better. That's how we can help each other, right? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Nathan. I could not, I can't think of anything I would add to that.
No. And thank you for coming out tonight and sharing. There's a lot of vulnerability that was shared, not only from the audience, so thank you all very much, but as well as the council members. Can we give everybody a round of applause for a great evening tonight? Just a couple housekeeping things. These are on the table. talks about your council members, gives you some ways to contact them. I can tell you every one of these council members watches their emails very carefully. They respond to them very well. They reach out to staff to get information and get them back to you. So don't wait for the next one of these. Don't feel like you have to wait for a city council meeting. These folks are readily accessible, but there's other options too to reach out between these items. This was our second of 3 town hall meetings. There'll be one more tomorrow night from 6 to 7:30 in this building again. Ward 3 will be out with Megan Guido and Councilmember Pat Wright. And then obviously a big thanks again to Councilmembers Weller and Macoll. I'm sure they'll stay around and answer a few more questions, but if you wanted to check in with some of our staff as well, here with myself tonight and RJ, you've already met. If you haven't met Fire Chief Mike Heston, he's in the gray shirt in the back, and Police Chief Jake Opkennorth is also here with us tonight. But again, thank you for coming out and spending some time with us tonight.
Mike, if we may, real quick, just end here on our, is that all right? Just give ending.
Wow, this has been a very emotional and a very intriguing and inspirational exercise. I mean, that's kind of clinical, but yeah. And we hope to see more of all of you in the future. There's always more to talk about. Anything you want to know about downtown or whatever, we'll get you to the right staff member, or we'll get you to the data. There were some things that were said last night that were a little maybe incorrect, and I want to correct some of those after I get some sources checked. So yeah, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you. Thank you.
And I'd just like to say thank you so much to Mike and RJ, and of course, chiefs, both of you, and everybody here. As has been mentioned by all of you, it takes all of us. Pullman is at an extremely exciting time, and it really will change if you're able to come to us, be open, let us know how we can make things work better. We're not some Seattle or anything like this, you know, so drop us a line and let's keep moving forward. So thank you so much, everybody.
All right. Good night.